This is how I made $500,000 in a year, part two, and eventually got busted by the feds and served 5 years in federal prison. I've talked about my federal case quite a bit in magazine and newspaper interviews I've done, and I talked about it on the Al Prophet interview. But now that I have my own channel and I'm doing my own videos, I want to go more explicitly into what led up to that and what was going on during that time period. So I talked about in the first video how I'd started selling Molly and club drugs through SAS. And because my habit grew exponentially with the increase in money that I was making, I eventually started selling heroin. And I was selling it for the paisa, and then he got busted, and then he called me from prison with a cell phone, and he told me that his wife, Diana Ortiz, was going to take over the business. And I say her name, that's her real name, because she was the star witness on the case. That's who set me up. Usually I change names because I want to protect people that haven't gotten busted, or, it's just uncouth to use real names. But in that case, that's her real name. Her name was Diana Ortiz. They also called her Goofy. And as soon as I moved into the new house, I lived in this duplex. It was a nice 2-bed, 2-bath. It was in Hope Ranch, which is one of the nicest parts of Santa Barbara, surrounded by $30 million homes, gated community. I didn't tell anybody where I lived. Before at the other 5-bedroom house that I was living at, we were having traffic all the time. And I was constantly concerned that we were either going to get raided or that we were going to get robbed. So we moved into this new place, and I was really making a lot of money during that period. But things started to fall apart, and I attribute that to two things. My drug habit got absolutely out of control. And my girlfriend, Jenny, who had been opposed to my own heroin addiction and had been against it the whole time, her moral compass got skewed. The more money we made selling the other drugs, the more okay she was with selling heroin. And she had always had health problems. She's epileptic, and back then in 2008, if you had a pre-existing condition, you would get precluded by the premium insurance providers. So she was epileptic and she couldn't get good health insurance. So she did a lot of weird home remedy stuff, and rarely went to the doctor. And if she did, she'd go to like an urgent care and we pay out of pocket, or we go to a hospital. And we went down to LA. We stayed at the Beverly Hotel, and it was one of our anniversaries. I'm down there doing speedballs, and I'm going in and out of the bathroom. I mean, with coke, you have to do it all the time. And she says she had gotten this lump on her neck. It was about the size of a golf ball, and she was in a lot of pain. And so she said, she begged me to shoot her up with heroin. And because she was in pain, and also because she said, if you love this substance more than you love me, I at least want to see what it is. And one of my few principles I had as a junkie was never to turn people on to IV heroin. It destroyed my life, killed a lot of my friends, and I just was patently against it. But she was in legitimate pain, and she was begging me for it. So I shot her up. And that's the number two thing that I attribute to why everything imploded and fell apart, and why I eventually got busted. Because the minute that I shot her up for the first time, she became a junkie with me. And she was always my anchor of stability. She had a better business sense than me. And it wasn't even like she was my girlfriend at a certain point. It was more like she was a nurse for me, because my habit was so bad. At this point, I'm doing 10 to 11 grams a day. And I'm sure people are watching and they'll oh, you're so full of shit. You can't do that much. Well, I was getting a pound on Monday and a pound on Friday. So I had pounds of heroin at my house, and I was doing half-gram shots every hour, over and over and over again. And I also got on the methadone program not because I was trying to get off heroin, because I was sick of waking up dope sick. And methadone keeps you well for 24 hours. So I wanted to be on it so that I wouldn't wake up sick, because no matter how much heroin I had, it didn't matter. If I had a 6-hour sleep interval, I woke up violently sick. I'd cook my heroin to do a shot, and it would just I'd be projectile vomiting, and I was sick of doing that. So I signed up for the methadone program, and in theory, they give you a 40 milligram dose. This is a clinic called Aegis. That's what we have in California. Don't know what it's called in other parts of the country, but in theory, they give you a 40 milligram dose, and then they taper you down, and eventually you get off heroin. But they also have maintenance, and they drug test you, and every time they drug test you, they increase your dose if you have it dirty, and they don't give you take-homes. If you're doing good and you're in compliance in the methadone program, they give you take-homes, the little bottles, and that's, people sell them. You go there like twice a month, they give you take-homes in your lockbox, and, so that way you don't have to go at 5 a.m. every morning to the clinic to dose. But if you're still using, then they keep upping your dose, and you don't get take-homes. So now I had the duality of being addicted to heroin and methadone, and I got up to about 120 milligrams legally. That's what the clinic was giving me. And then I was buying take-homes from people or trading heroin for it in the parking lot. And so I was doing 180 milligrams of methadone a day. And my crack habit was absolutely out of control. There were periods where I was doing $600 worth a day. And again, people, you can't do that many drugs. Well, when you have that kind of money, you do that amount of drugs if you're already a hardcore drug addict. I mean, it was like disposable income. So I'm literally just doing drugs all day, every day. There was absolutely no restraint. And around that time period, a bunch of interesting stuff happened. My best friend Jeff had moved down to Redlands, which is a city that's right next to San Bernardino. And he moved down there, under the pretense of getting clean. But just like any drug addict, he goes down there and just gets into the drug scene down there. And so he's doing drugs down in Redlands. He's doing meth. He's doing heroin. And he calls me and he says that there's this mystery pill. It's about that big, about the size of a dime, white pill. And his girlfriend had taken one, and she had gotten a DUI. She had gotten completely belligerent and disoriented off of this little pill. And she got a DUI. She got in a car accident and got a DUI. And he said he gave the pill to another person. Same thing happened. And that he took one, and he described it like taking 50 Xanax bars and living through it. And they didn't know what it was. And I said, well, where did it come from? And he was hanging out with this Crip down there. And I guess this Crip had 5,000 of them, he said. And I, came up with the theory that I thought they were Quaaludes. And sure enough, he sent me a picture of one of the pills, and we Googled it, and we figured out that it was a Quaalude. Not the roars that they used to make pharmaceutically in the United States. These were the methaquaaludes that they were pressing in India shortly after they got outlawed. We did some research, and we found out what they were. And this Crip that was down there had 5,000 of them. So I told Jeff, let me get on the phone with this guy. So I talked to him, and I said, I'll buy them all off you. He goes, well, what are they? I go, they're date rape drugs. You don't want those. Those are roofies. If you get caught with the roofies, you're going to get a charge beyond just drug possession or drug sales. And he's like, well, how much you want to pay? I said, I'll give you 35 cents a pill. He said, yeah, bet. Let's do it. So I got down to Redlands. It's like, 2.5 hour drive from Santa Barbara. And I met up with this guy in like an In-N-Out burger parking lot. And he had a Ziploc bag full of the Quaaludes. And I bought them, 5,000 of them. I paid 35 cents a piece for them. And I started selling them to like marijuana growers that I know up in Northern California. And I was selling them for $50 a piece because they're so rare. I made a lot of money off the Quaaludes. I mean, I had thousands of them. And it's one interesting thing that was going on during that time. And we had bought tickets to go to Burning Man, which is a huge free-thinking festival. It's an arts festival in Black Rock, Nevada. Back then, it was even more fringe and obscure than it is now. Tens of thousands of people get naked, do drugs, very like raver, hippie type crowd. And, now it's a little more mainstream. A lot of people go to it. Celebrities go to it. But back then, this was in 2008, it was still, pretty fringe. So we had gotten tickets. I'd never been to it, but we were going to a lot of festivals back then. We went to all the music festivals. We went to Lollapalooza. We went to Coachella. We were going to really like exclusive rave parties back then that Sass had introduced us to you know, he knew a lot of like big DJs back then, so we'd get to go to all these exclusive parties, and we were having a lot of fun. That's one thing. I mean, you know, I talk about all the misery and all the pain that I was enduring back then. I actually did have good times, and going to Burning Man was a good memory. And we were getting ready to go to it. But my crack habit was just out of control. And now Jenny's doing heroin too, so she can't nurse me as much. And I had met this guy named Patrick back in probably 03, 04. He was this Asian guy that was from Florida, and I met him in Santa Barbara County Jail. He had been busted for crystal meth possession. Back then, simple possession was a felony, and you actually went and served county time for it. Now it's a misdemeanor in California, but back then you actually did time if you got caught with like a gram of crystal meth, and that's what happened to him. So I'd met him, and we became kind of we were both doing like 30 days or something, and we became really close. And I remember we were in jail, and this guy came in. He was this obnoxious guy, like a frat boy type, and he's like, he was in there for vandalism, only doing a couple days. And he's like, I have a vial of acid in my property, and the stupid cops thought they were breath drop vials, and they didn't catch it. And Patrick's like, when you get out, will you put some on paper and send it to me? And the guy's like, yeah, of course, if you start giving me some of your commissary. And I'm telling Patrick, I'm like, dude, this guy is hustling you. Don't give him a bag of coffee. Don't give him your soups. This guy's so full of shit. He's like some frat boy. He doesn't have a vial of acid. But Patrick was so convinced that this guy had the acid that he kept giving him commissary stuff. So the guy gets out, and sure enough, a couple days later, we get a piece of mail, or Patrick does, and it's from Suzanne Summers. And it's like a piece of binder paper with the lyrics to Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, and it has these little clouds. And we put it up to the light, and sure enough, where all the clouds are drawn, there's little drops. So you can tell that he dropped something on it. And Patrick's like, let's eat it. So we cut them up, and we ate them at like 5 in the morning. And they used to feed you back in those days at like 4:30 in the morning. So right after breakfast, we took it, and it worked. We tripped. We played chess all day. And it was interesting tripping in jail. But, you know, that was an experience that Patrick and I had. And then he ended up moving back to Florida. And I hadn't heard from him for a long time. So now I'm gearing up to go to Burning Man. And I'm really addicted to crack. And Jenny wants me to go to rehab, even though she's shooting heroin. And this guy, Patrick, calls me. And he's living in Florida. And he told me that he just married a stripper. She has 3 kids, and he's in love, you know, kind of thing. He knew her like a month or something, and he ended up marrying her. He's like, you got to come out here, bro. And, you know, because I had told him, hey, I'm making a lot of money right now. I'm selling drugs. Constant party atmosphere here in California. You should come here. He's like, no, come here. He's like, my wife's uncle owns a ranch out here, and it's like these big cow fields, and you can pick wild mushrooms, psilocybin mushrooms. He's like, you can literally get pounds of it for free. And since I was going to Burning Man anyway, my plan was to go out to Florida, go spend a week, get off crack, because I had to go just get away from Santa Barbara. I'm just getting high all fucking day, and I needed to get away anyway. So this was going to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. I was going to go out there, get off the crack, and I was going to pick 30 pounds of mushrooms, 40 pounds of mushrooms, grind them all into, like, you know, little shake of mushrooms, put it into brownie batter, and make sheets of brownies. Put cellophane over it, shrink wrap, aluminum foil, and ship them back to California. At Burning Man, it's like uncouth to sell drugs for actual money. But everybody, it's like a barter system where everyone trades, and there's all this exotic drugs there, from what we had been told about it. So my whole plan was to go out there and get a bunch of these mushrooms, turn them into brownies, and then go trade all the drugs, all the mushroom brownies at Burning Man, and come back to California after Burning Man with like all these exotic drugs. And I'd get off crack. So it seemed like a perfect plan. So I end up flying from LA to Florida. He lived in a town called I think he was either in Bradenton or Sarasota. He's one of the two. And I flew out there, and remember, I'm strung out on heroin, and I'm on the methadone program. So I had to set up a courtesy dose out there, meaning that I could go to one of their clinics out there and dose every day. But I also brought a bunch of heroin. Now, they were coming in these little multicolored balloons about this big, the heroin. So what I did is I got a big bag of king-size M&Ms, and I emptied half of them, and I filled the bag up with the little multicolored balloons, and then I filled the M&M bag up with the M&Ms that I had taken. And I put some syringes in my DOP kit, in my hygiene kit, in my carry-on, and I went to the pharmacy and I bought one of those little insulin necklaces. So if they said anything about the needles, I can just be like, look, I'm diabetic. Look, I have my little insulin thing. And my plan was just to walk through security checkpoint eating the M&Ms. Which is, like, in retrospect, just completely, like, idiotic. But I ended up doing it. They never said anything about the needles. It was in a 10-pack. It was still in the package. But I brought that on my carry-on. I cannot believe that it got through, but it did. And I got on with all these balloons full of heroin. I was literally doing shots of heroin in the airplane as we were going to Florida. So I get there, and Patrick picks me up, brings me to his place, and it's him, and he's married to the stripper girl, and she's got 3 kids, like 2 teenagers and like a 9-year-old daughter. And right when I get there, he hits me up for money. He's like, hey man, we're going to go to the grocery store. You think you can put a few $100s into it? And I'm like, a few $100s? And all I brought with me was a credit card, you know? I had a credit card with like $3,500 on it. I didn't bring any cash or anything. And I decided to help him out. So we go to the grocery store and I buy a bunch of groceries, thinking that maybe it's just, you know, for me. But I'd found out he had just gotten laid off. They had 3 kids to support, and his wife was stripping, and that was their only source of income. And I think because I had told him that I was selling drugs and making a lot of money, he had this plan to get me out there, and he was going to try to, like, mooch as much money off me as possible. So I'm asking him about the mushrooms, like day 2, day 3 there, and he's like, oh, we have to wait for it to rain, but don't worry, the weather in Florida is all bipolar. And I hadn't been to Florida since the Mike Virgin thing. I hate that state ever since that whole thing went down. But I'm out there, and I'm hoping that, you know, it's going to rain. That's how it is in Florida. It'll rain for like an hour, and then it'll be like super sunny again. It's bizarre weather out there. So finally it rains, and he kind of has his 2 teenage kids go out and pick the mushrooms. I don't even do it. They just come back with these big garbage bags full. And he's like, will you give me $500 if we make this happen? I said, you know what, sure. So I was just, you know, he's my friend. I'm trying to help him out. So they come back with these bags of mushrooms. We got coffee grinders, and we grind first of all, we put them in the microwave so that they would get really crisp and dry. And we put it in a coffee grinder. Made it into almost powder. I mean, very like flaky, you know, very fine mushroom particles or whatever. And then his wife cooked them into brownies, and I gave her the address, and she shipped them back to California. Now, around this time, you know, his son was like his stepson was like a big stoner. So he was showing me one of his glass bongs that he had, and he had like, I don't know, probably like a $300 or $400 glass bong, and he was showing it to me, and I was all high, and I'm like sitting at a table, and he hands me the bong, and I go to grab it, and the bong just falls over and shatters into a million pieces, and they're kind of just looking at me in disbelief, like this is his kids, like stepkids' pride and joy. And I'm like, look, I'll pay for it. Don't worry about it. He's like, okay, all right. I was like, I'll buy you a brand new one. You'll probably come out on top. So the next day, Patrick comes up to me and he's like, hey, you think you can give me the cash for the bong? I got somebody that has one that he wants. I'm like, yeah, sure. How much is it? And he says $700. And so now it's really apparent to me that this guy's just trying to scheme on me. And this has happened to me a few times where I meet someone in jail and like they're like my, they're my good friend in jail, and then they turn out to be a total piece of shit when I get out. So he wants $700, and I'm like, nah, I'm like, look, man, I'll give you $300. I think that's fair for a bong, and if you can't find one that's as good as the one he had, I got people in California that blow glass. I can get a better one. So, he's like, all right, just give me 300 cash. I'm like, all right, cool. So I end up, I didn't have cash out there, so I had to set up my PIN number on my credit card. And I was telling him that. I'm like, well, I have a credit card. Will that work? He's like, no, I need cash. Okay, well, I'm going to have to set up a PIN number so I can get a cash advance from my credit card. So he gives me the house phone, and I set it up. And I didn't know this, but he was listening to me on a different house phone. And he took down my PIN number. And so I go get the $300 out. I give it to him, and I go to sleep. And every time I go to sleep, I put like my pack of cigarettes, I put like my pack of cigarettes, my lighter, anything that's in my pocket, my cell phone, and my wallet. And they're all just kind of like on the nightstand thing next to the couch or like the coffee table. And so I guess while I was sleeping, he went and he stole my credit card out of it because now he had the PIN number. And he started doing that. I was out there for, 5 more days. And he ended up, I think he could get $600 a day out of my credit card. So he was doing this every day. Like there's a limit to how much you can get. And he starts draining my credit card with cash advances. Now, the only reason that I knew is because I called and checked my balance, and, I only had like $800 left on it or something, and I had $3,500 on it before I left. And so I checked my transactions on the phone number, and they said that someone was getting $600 every day from the ATM. So I knew that this guy burned me, and I was so upset about it. But I didn't let him know. I was like, I'm going to get this guy back. I'm going to figure out a way to fuck him over. So his wife would go strip like in the day. She did like a day shift or whatever. This was the summer, because Burning Man's in August. This was probably in July, I want to say. And the kids, I don't know, I think maybe they went and did, I forget, but for whatever reason, they weren't at the house. So it's just Patrick and I one day, and I'm supposed to be going home the next day. And I tell Patrick, I say, hey, I really want to bring some Florida Coke back because the Coke out here is better. Can you get any? And he goes, yeah. I go, okay, I just want a gram. How much is that? He's like, oh, it's only $40. I'm like, okay, cool. I said, but my credit card's not working for some reason. I'm going to have Jenny Western Union me some money, and why don't you go get me a gram, spot me $40, and I'll give you $100 on top of it just for the favor. He's like, okay, cool. And so he leaves. And I forgot to mention, when I found out that he had stolen from me, I called my friend Josh. It's a guy that I met when I was doing time out in Florida, out in West Palm Beach, another jail friend. And I explained to him the situation. I said, hey, I came out here, I was getting these mushrooms, and I got burned for a couple $1,000s. And Josh is like, fuck that. I got friends with guns. Let's go over there and we'll just fuck this dude up. We'll beat him up. We'll do whatever. Rob him for all of his stuff. And I said, no, I got a plan. So my plan was to get Patrick to go get the Coke. And while he was gone, I was going to have my friend Josh roll up with his friends, and we were just going to clean their house out for everything valuable. So that's what we did. And, Patrick fell for it. He left. He's like, okay, it'll take me about 45 minutes to go get it, and I'll be back. I said, cool. So I had called Josh before he left, and I said, okay, he's about to leave. Come to the area. This guy lived in, on the other side of Florida. He lived in, I think West Palm Beach. Yeah, because I was in the West Palm Beach stockade when I met him. He lived in that area. And so those guys drove down, and they were kind of waiting for Patrick to leave. And as soon as he's leaving, I texted them, and I'm like, okay, he's leaving. So they come in a truck, and we go into his house. We take all their TVs. This guy was like a big guitar aficionado, and I mean, he had thousands of dollars worth of really expensive guitar equipment, and we took all of his shit. We took all of his amps. I mean, we took probably $15,000 worth of shit from him. Just cleaned him out. I mean, I couldn't believe that he had taken me out there, for a jack move. And we load my friend Josh's truck up with all this stuff, and I end up going back to West Palm Beach with them. And Patrick's blowing my phone up. What the fuck? What happened? Where are you? All my shit's gone. And I said, well, you shouldn't have burned me. You shouldn't have done some calculated jack move on me, motherfucker. And I just hung up on him. Kept calling me and calling me and calling me. But we ended up liquidating some of the shit that we boosted from his house. And I took a plane back to California. And not surprisingly, when I get back, his wife never sent the mushrooms. So who knows what they did with that. They put them into brownies. They probably got the idea that these are worth a bunch, it's worth a bunch of money. And they just ended up never giving it to me. So I get back. I am off crack now, and I don't go back to it. I returned to my heroin habit, but I'm off crack. Jenny and I are just doing a lot of heroin. And around this time, I had a friend named Luke that lived in Hartford, Connecticut. I'd met him when I was out at that writing program in Boston. And he was going to the 10,000 Lakes Festival in Minnesota, which is like, I guess, a huge festival in the Midwest. And he knew that I had Molly, or that I could get Molly. And he wanted to buy, I forget how much. I think he wanted to buy 4 kilos. 4 kilos, whatever it was 60,000. I want to say it was 4 kilos. And he asked me if I could do it. Now, I didn't have the weight on me. I had to call SAS. And he's like, I'm going to drive cross country out to California, and I'm going to give you the money. We'll get the Molly, and then I'm going to take a rental car from California all the way out to the Midwest with it. He was going to get it all, I don't know. He was going to hide it somehow in the car, and that's the way he wanted to do it. So, yeah, he wanted 4 keys. And I called SAS, and I told him, we would always talk in code over the phone, but we did talk on the phone. Incidentally, after I got busted by the feds and I got my federal discovery and I saw how much they listen to phone calls, they really do listen to every fucking thing you say on the phone. So definitely beware of that. But, we would talk in code, and I told him that I needed, I think, 7 keys. Yeah, 7 keys, and he was going to do them for 10,000 a piece. Now, the best he would ever do them for me for was 10,000 if I got that many of them. So I was going to get 7 of them for 70,000. And I made the order, and he was very good about stuff like that. If I ever needed a big order like that, he'd tell me, okay, I'm going to come down on a Tuesday, and I'll drop it off to you. And he'd usually front me, or if I had cash up front, then I would get it for cheaper. This particular time, I had 70,000. Luke came and he gave me 60,000, and then I was putting 10,000 of my own money, and I was going to get 3 keys for 10,000 because of the price break with him getting 7. So Luke comes, he's there, and I'm supposed to meet SAS, like the next day, whatever. Luke spent a few days with us, and we were all supposed to meet the next day to get it. So he ends up giving me the cash, and I put my own 10,000 into it. And I didn't let SAS meet Luke. I ended up going to a hotel. That's what we would usually do if we got weight. We would go get a hotel, and we would exchange money in one room, and then he would give me the key to another room where we never wanted to have the money and the drugs in the same place. So I'd go to the hotel, we would exchange the money in a room, and then he would leave, put the money somewhere, and he'd come back and he'd give me the hotel key. And that's the system if he was dropping off weight like that to me. So the day comes for me to meet him. And we go, same routine that we normally do. We went and got a hotel in Santa Barbara. It was like a Motel 6 or something. And I end up bringing out the 70,000. And he goes, "Hey, I don't have it." And I go, "What do you mean?" He's like, "Well, I couldn't tell you that on the phone. I don't want to talk about it on the phone, but I'm going to have to get it, and it's going to be a week before I can come back." And I go, "Well, this isn't my money." And he's like, "I don't know what to tell you. If you want it, these people are kind of like at the end of this particular batch, and it's in demand right now, so you need to give me the money up front." Now, all the time that I had done business with SAS, I had never had to give him money. I'd never had to front him money for the drugs. It was usually him giving me credit. So that was like the first thing that was odd with that. But I gave him the money. I mean, I've been doing business with him for a couple years now, and I gave him the money and he left. And the whole plan was that he was going to come down in a couple days. He said he had to go up to San Francisco to get it. And he was getting some other keys for other people, and that he'd come down in a few days or whatever. He gave me some day. So my friend Luke was not happy about that. He, had a whole trip that he had planned where he's going to come, and he's on like a time frame, and he was pissed off, but he had to hang out in Santa Barbara for however long it was before SAS came back. So the day that I'm supposed to get the Molly, SAS doesn't pick up his phone, and he doesn't meet me where he says he's going to meet me. He has like 3 phones. He has like a personal cell phone number, which I had, and he has like 2 bat phones, 2 throwaway numbers that he did business on. And I had the same thing. I had throwaway phones, and I had like my regular phone. Every single number he had was disconnected. And this guy Luke is freaking the fuck out, right? And I'm like, "Look, this isn't like him. I don't know." He's like, "Well, can you cover the money?" And I could have covered the money, but I said, "Let's just wait to see how it plays out." He goes, "Okay." I think I pretended like I didn't have the money. So he ends up staying in Santa Barbara for a couple days. And during this time period now, the only person that knew where I lived was the runner that Diana had for me. So we had a system in place where he would come on a Monday and he would come on a Friday. And on the Monday, he'd give me £1, and on a Friday, he'd give me £1. And in my duplex, I had a garage. And I was driving a Chevy Malibu. I had a Tahoe. We had an Eclipse. We had a Lexus. But the car that we used for business was always my Chevy Malibu. We had like a 2008 Chevy Malibu. Brand new one. It got like 32 gallons to the mile. And it looked inconspicuous, and that's why we used that car. And he drove the exact same car. And they had a false bottom in it that they had installed. So what he would do is he would just come. It was a 2-car garage. He'd come and park the car on one side, and he would just take the other car. And we literally would have to take the car to a mechanic. They'd have to raise the car, and it was in this metallic box that was installed underneath the car, and that's how we got it out. If it was getting delivered. If we went to LA, we would have grocery bags full of groceries. The entire trunk would be full, and the bag with the dope would be in a Petco bag with a bunch of dog toys and biscuits. And we had these little, they're like the little cans that you get at the head shops where you can unscrew the bottom. There's a false bottom. £1 would fit into one of those. And these were specially designed by Diana's people. To like actually accommodate weight. So around the time that SAS burns me, I don't know what happened to him. I don't know if he got busted. I don't know if he burns me. Diana, I go to, it's like a Monday, and I'm expecting my load, my normal pound that I get on Monday. And the guy never shows up. His name was Diablo. Diablo doesn't show up. I go to my garage, and my car's still parked there. And I'm like, what the fuck? Now, at this point, everything had gotten crazy as far as the amount of people that were depending on me for the weight. Like, I was selling 2 pounds in a small beach town is supplying most of the town. I mean, there's not that many people that are using it like that. So a lot of people, I'm like part of the main pipeline at that time. And I'm definitely not proud of that, but that's just, that's what eventually happened. So this guy doesn't show up on a Monday. Luke is in town. He's blowing me up. He's on my ass because he wants me to give him the $60,000. And I call Diana. I'm like, hey, what's up? Diablo didn't show up. And she goes, yeah, he got busted last night. And he's in jail. So you're going to have to come down here. And so I told Jenny that she had to come with me. And Jenny did not want to come with me. She's like, no, no, no. She was so against it. She didn't want to come. And I was feeling a lot of pressure because everything was kind of coming apart at this point. You know, I had lost... It seemed like Sass had burned me. That's how I was feeling. Now this guy Diablo just got busted, and now I have to go down to LA to get it. And it was kind of out of necessity that I go down there. So we got in this huge fight about it, but I'm like, come on, this is going to fuck up everything. I don't want to go alone. So she ends up coming with me. So we go down to LA, and we drove my Malibu down there. We had the trunk full of the groceries and the Petco bag. And we get down there, and we get to Diana's house. This is the first time I got busted. I got busted twice. But the first time I got busted, we get to Diana's house, and we go inside. And the first thing that struck me odd with the whole situation is she asked me if I wanted to get high. Now, I knew that she did heroin, and she knew that I did heroin, but we never got high together, ever. And I did a shot with her. I said, okay. And now she starts telling me this weird story about how I can't be seen there because she told the new runner that I got shot in a shootout, some weird shit like that. That's red flag number 2. So she tells me that I have to go hide in the car. So I go and I lay down in the back of in the Malibu. I'm high as a kite. She gives me some really good heroin. And so I wait for about an hour. Jenny goes in there. She has the bag of pet food with the false bottom inside, and it's loaded with the cash. She comes out an hour later, and she puts it in the trunk, and she goes, okay, you're driving. She didn't want to do this to begin with. So I hop in the driver's seat, and we leave. This is in East LA where I'm picking it up. And we get on the freeway, and maybe 10 minutes after we get on the freeway, a sheriff gets behind us, and his lights go on. And I look at Jenny, I go, we're busted. She's like, what do you mean? How do you know they're not just pulling us over for a traffic stop? I said, because it's the sheriff. If it was a traffic stop, it would be highway patrol. Sheriffs don't pull you over on the freeway unless you're busted. And she's like, oh my God, what are we going to do? I'm like, just keep your mouth shut. It's very well hidden. They're not going to find it. She's like, okay. So I pull over on the freeway, pull us out of the car with guns, and they're telling us that they want to search the car. They're giving us no explanation of what we did, why they want to search it. I'm not on probation or parole, so at first I say no. I say, no, I'm not going to let you search the car. And then they're telling me that they're going to get a warrant if I don't let them do it, and it's just going to be a faster process because they're like, well, is there something in the car you don't want us to see? I'm like, no, I just believe in my constitutional rights. They go, well, we're going to get a search warrant, so we're searching it regardless. If we can search it and there's really nothing in there, we'll let you go. I'm thinking that they saw me leaving this drug house, and that's why they're pulling us over. So Jenny and I are cuffed. They cuff us. They put us in the back of the cop car, and we're kind of whispering to each other, and I'm like, look, it's very unlikely that they're going to find this stuff. Maybe we should just let them search us. I mean, it's hidden really well in the pet food thing. Jenny's like, it's up to you. So I tell the cop, like, okay, I'm going to let you search me, but there's nothing in there, and after you realize that there's nothing in there, you're going to let me go, right? He said, yeah. So we're sitting in the back of the car, and we see the cop pop the trunk, and he goes right for the pet food can. I remember Jenny was like, they found it. And she starts crying. And she's like, oh my God, we're going to go to prison. I'm like, just don't say anything. I'll take the blame for it. So she is just having a complete breakdown. Cop kind of comes up holding the bag of drugs. He's like, what's this? Like, all triumphant that he found the drugs that are going to put me in prison for 5 fucking years. And we don't say anything to him. They take, he's like, do you want to make any statements? I say no. So he ends up taking us to the East LA substation. And he puts me in a cell, and he puts Jenny in a different cell. And maybe an hour later, they come up to me and they say, listen, did she know about what was in the car? And I don't say anything, and they say, if you sign a confession and you say that these were your drugs and that you were planning on distributing them, we'll let her go. I didn't have to implicate anybody else, just that they were my drugs and that I planned on selling them. I said, okay, if you let her go. So they bring me a signed confession. In the documentary that we're making, all this stuff's going to be in there. We have documents, we have footage of us getting arrested, all that stuff. But they end up bringing me the signed confession. I sign it, and about 3 hours later, they let us both go. I have no idea why, but I know that it looks bad. I know that we can't tell anybody that I just got caught with a half pound of heroin, and that they just let us go like that. And that was another odd thing. We're usually picking up a pound twice a week. She gave us only a half pound this time. So they caught us with dope and I think another $7,000 worth of cash. And I'm asking Jenny, I said, what did you tell them? And she's like, I didn't tell them anything. I'm like, well, why are they letting both of us go? So I'm assuming now that this is a search and seizure issue. That's what I'm thinking. I don't know for sure. And I remember how empty I felt, because I knew, even though they let us go, and I had that false optimism in my mind that drug addicts often have, that, well, if they let us go, it's a good sign. I knew that I was fucked somehow. And it was a pretty quiet drive, driving from LA back to Santa Barbara. And we're empty-handed. We didn't have any dope. And everybody's kind of, blowing my phone up at this point. What's going on? What's going on? I haven't had anything in 3 or 4 days now. So everybody's drying up. People are getting sick. There's hysteria going on in the heroin scene in Santa Barbara because I got busted and the supply just completely went away. So I end up calling Diana. Now, my instinct is that the new runner set us up. She hired a new runner. He must have known that the dope was going to go in the pet food can, and that's who set us up. I never in a million years thought it would be Diana, because I'm not used to the federal level. There's so much weird stuff that goes on when you get busted federally. Like, they let us go. The reason they let us go is because they want to rack up arrests. They don't want to stop the conspiracy. They want to rack up arrests before they testify to the grand jury and present the case to indict everybody. So they get all the arrests on paper, but they don't take everyone off the street. And then after they have enough evidence for the grand jury that this mass conspiracy was going on, that's when they indict you, and that's when they do the big sweep and arrest everyone. But I didn't know that. All I know is that I got caught with a half pound, and I wasn't in jail, and it looked weird. So I didn't want to tell people, but I'm also dealing with the issue. Luke's freaking out because I owe him $60,000. Now I definitely don't want to give him $60,000 of my own money, because I have no idea what the future holds for me. He's kind of harassing me right now, and I tell Diana that I got busted. I call her and I tell her, I go, hey, I got arrested last night, or, a couple nights ago. And she goes, yeah, I think the runner's a rat. And I go, what are we going to do? And she goes, you need to come back down here, and you just deal with me. We won't even deal with the runner. I'll already have it so that we make sure that nothing weird goes on. And I'm not in my right state of mind. I'm doing 10, 11 grams of heroin a day to nothing, just doing methadone, which isn't calibrating me correctly because I'm so dependent on this huge dope habit. And I have this guy yelling in my ear, this guy yelling in my ear. I have no idea what's going to happen with this arrest that just happened. There was no paperwork, no nothing. They just arrested me and let me go. So I didn't know what was going on. And one of my girlfriend's friends was also a junkie, and I ended up calling her. She drove a nice car, and I said, hey, I got robbed in LA when I was going to pick up. I didn't tell her I got busted because I didn't want to spook her. Will you take me down there to go score? And so we made a plan to go back down to LA the next day. and I'll continue in part 3 of the story on the next video. Thanks for watching.